Sumerian tablets are probably one of the oldest form of written record that we have. They've been translated, and they tell exciting stories about how gods intermingled with human beings and actually had a hand in the creation of human beings.
Have you ever wondered who invented the very first writing system, built the world's first cities, and created innovations that still shape our daily lives 6,000 years later? This video reveals the extraordinary story of the Sumerians, the forgotten civilization that gave birth to everything we consider modern civilization. We'll uncover their mysterious origins, explore their groundbreaking inventions from the wheel to the 60-minute hour, and discover how their mighty cities rose and fell in ancient Mesopotamia. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand how this single civilization created the foundation stones of human progress, and why their sudden disappearance remains one of history's greatest mysteries that continues to baffle archaeologists today. The mysterious origins. But first, here's what makes the Sumerians truly mysterious. Nobody knows where they came from. Picture this, around 4000 BC, in the harsh deserts of southern Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, an advanced civilization suddenly appeared seemingly from nowhere. This wasn't gradual development. This was an explosion of human innovation that archaeologists are still trying to explain. The region before the Sumerians was inhabited by the Obed people, who built simple irrigation systems and mud brick temples. They made pottery and lived in small settlements. Then something extraordinary happened. The Sumerians arrived and within centuries had transformed the landscape into the world's first urban civilization. But linguistic evidence reveals a stunning mystery. The Sumerian language isn't related to any known language family. It's what scholars call a language isolate. Even more puzzling, many Sumerian cities, named like Nippur and Lagash, don't come from Sumerian at all. River names, lake names, and farming terms were borrowed from earlier peoples. This suggests Sumerian speakers arrived in the region and adopted parts of the local culture. So where did they originate? According to their own myths, the Sumerians came by sea from a paradise island called Dilmun, modern-day Bahrain. Archaeological evidence does show Sumerian presence there, but the Sumerians appear in Mesopotamia much earlier than any evidence from Dilmun. Some scholars propose they migrated from Anatolia, the Caucasus, the Arabian Peninsula, or even the Indus Valley. Polish Assyriologist Marcin Mogielski suggested they might be related to the people who founded the Indus Valley civilization. Others point to connections with Tibet or the Iranian Plateau. The truth is shocking. After more than 150 years of archaeological investigation, the origins of history's first civilization remain completely unknown. The birth of cities and civilization. Here's what's even more remarkable. The Sumerians didn't just build cities, they invented the entire concept of urban civilization in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Southern Mesopotamia was a land of extremes: scorching heat, no forests, virtually no stone, and a serious lack of metals and natural resources. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers flooded unpredictably. Unlike the steady floods of the Nile, these floods could destroy everything, turning vast areas into uninhabitable swampland overnight. Yet in this harsh environment, the Sumerians achieved something that had never been done before in human history. They created two cities. The key was the revolutionary irrigation technology. The Sumerians built vast networks of canals, dikes, and reservoirs to tame the unpredictable rivers. A typical Sumerian city-state controlled around 300 square kilometers of landscape crisscrossed by canals, roughly the size of Queens, New York. Maintaining such systems required thousands of people working in perfect coordination. This necessity created the world's first complex social hierarchies and specialized labor divisions. Not everyone had to farm anymore. People could become artisans, merchants, priests, administrators, and warriors. By 3500 BC, the city of Uruk had grown to house between 25,000 to 50,000 people, making it larger than most cities would be for the next 3,000 years. Compare this to other major settlements of the time, which had populations of only 3,000 to 5,000 people maximum. Uruk featured the world's first planned urban development: public gathering areas, bustling marketplaces, specialized production centers, and monumental temple districts. The city was surrounded by massive mud brick walls, the tallest in the world at that time. The most impressive structures were the ziggurats, massive step temple towers reaching towards the sky. The Anu ziggurat in Uruk, standing 23 meters tall, was humanity's first skyscraper. These weren't just buildings, they were the earthly homes of the gods, the center of all economic and political power in Sumerian society. The invention of writing. But perhaps their greatest innovation was solving a problem that had plagued human societies for thousands of years: how to keep accurate records of complex transactions and store knowledge permanently. The development of writing was driven by pure necessity. As Sumerian cities grew larger and their temple economies became more complex, priests needed to track thousands of different goods, workers, and transactions. The old system of clay tokens, where one token represented one sheep or one bushel of grain, was no longer sufficient. Around 3300 BC, temple officials in Uruk made a breakthrough. Instead of storing physical tokens, they began pressing the tokens into soft clay to create permanent records. This simple change sparked the earliest form of writing, proto-cuneiform. Initially, the system used pictographs, simple drawings that looked like the objects they represented. A picture of a sheep meant sheep. A picture of grain meant grain. But the Sumerians quickly realized they could use these symbols to represent not just objects, but actions and abstract ideas. The real revolution came when they discovered that symbols could represent sounds, not just meanings. In Sumerian, the word T meant both arrow and life. The same symbol could be used anywhere the sound T appeared, regardless of the word's actual meaning. This phonetic breakthrough made it possible to write complete sentences with grammar, tone, and all the complexity of spoken language. Sumerian scribes used reed styluses to press wedge-shaped marks into soft clay tablets at specific angles. This is why we call the script cuneiform, from the Latin cuneus meaning wedge. The impact was immediate and lasting. Cuneiform spread throughout the ancient world and was adopted by Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Elamites, Hittites, and many others. It remained the standard writing system of the Near East for over 3,000 years. More than 1 million cuneiform tablets have survived to this day. Because of this incredible archive, we know more about daily life in ancient Sumer than in many civilizations that lived thousands of years later. Revolutionary inventions that changed history. The Sumerians didn't stop at cities and writing. They created innovations that still govern our daily lives in ways more people never realize. Consider the wheel, humanity's most important transportation innovation. The Sumerians didn't just invent the wheel, they developed the first wheeled vehicles around 3500 BC. Initially used in religious processions to carry statues of gods and rulers, they later created the world's first war chariots. Instead of horses, they used donkeys, giving them what we might call the world's first donkey cavalry. But their mathematical innovations are even more remarkable. The Sumerians invented the base 60 number system that still structures our modern world. Why 60? They counted using finger segments. 12 segments on one hand multiplied by 5 fingers on the other hand equals 60. This is why we still have 24 hours in a day, 2 into 12, 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute, and 360 degrees in a circle. Every time you check the time or use GPS navigation, you're using Sumerian mathematics from 6,000 years ago. Their mathematical sophistication was extraordinary. Sumerian mathematicians could solve quadratic equations, calculate areas and volumes of complex shapes, and understood geometric principles. They recognized the relationship between the sides of right triangles, what we now call the Pythagorean theorem, more than 1,000 years before Pythagoras was born. In architecture, they pioneered the use of arches and columns, laying the groundwork for architectural principles still used today. Using only mud and reeds, they built structures so impressive that some believe the biblical Tower of Babel was inspired by Sumerian ziggurats. The Sumerians even invented soap by mixing animal fat with lye, and they developed the world's first brewing process. Beer was so important in Sumerian culture that they had a goddess of brewing named Ninkasi, whose name literally meant lady who fills the mouth. Their agriculture innovations included the plow, which revolutionized farming efficiency and freed up labor for specialized occupations. This single invention helped enable the complex division of labor that made urban civilization possible. Sumerian religion and the gods. What drove this remarkable civilization was a religious system so influential that its echoes can still be found in modern religions today. The Sumerians believed that humans were created by the gods from clay for one specific reason: to serve the deities by providing them with food, drink, and shelter. This wasn't seen as oppression, but as humanity's sacred duty, allowing the gods to focus on maintaining cosmic order rather than mundane tasks. Their pantheon was healed by the Great Seven, the most powerful deities who control every aspect of existence. An was the god of heaven, initially the supreme deity, and Lil, god of air and wind, became known as the king of the gods, who bestowed kingship upon Sumerian rulers. Enki, god of water and wisdom, was humanity's greatest protector and was credited with organizing and perfecting the world. These gods weren't distant, abstract forces. They were anthropomorphic beings with human emotions, desires, and flaws. They could be caring and compassionate, but also greedy, deceptive, and violently angry. Like humans, they ate, drank, married, had children, and could even be injured or killed. Each Sumerian city had its patron deity who literally lived within the great temple. The magnificent statue of the god on the altar wasn't just a representation. It was believed to be the actual earthly manifestation of the deity. Citizens brought daily offerings of food and drink, and the statue was dressed in rich clothing and jewelry. The most tragic thing that could befall a Sumerian city was the destruction of its main temple and the theft of its god statue. This meant their protector had abandoned them, leaving the city defenseless against divine punishment. Sumerian mythology profoundly influenced later civilizations. Their flood myth, featuring the hero Ziusudra, who built an ark to save humanity and animals from divine punishment, clearly inspired by later Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh and the biblical story of Noah's Ark. The famous Epic of Gilgamesh itself originated from Sumerian tales about their legendary king Bilgamesh, whose adventures included battling monsters, defying gods, and ultimately confronting the inevitability of human mortality. The Golden Age of Sumerian Power. By 2900 BC, the Sumerians had created something unprecedented in human history: a collection of sophisticated city-states that would dominate Mesopotamia for over 1,000 years. The early dynastic period marked the height of Sumerian political power. Major cities like Ur, Uruk, Lagash, Nippur, Kish, and Umma had evolved into true kingdoms, each controlling vast territories and engaging in complex diplomatic and military relationships. Ur became a major seaport and trading hub, its merchant sailing throughout the Persian Gulf and beyond. The famous royal cemetery of Ur, excavated in the 1920s by archaeologist Leonard Woolley, revealed the incredible wealth of Sumerian kings and queens. Queen Pabi's tomb contained magnificent golden headdresses, musical instruments decorated with gold and lapis lazuli, and the bodies of 74 attendants who were sacrificed to serve their rulers in the afterlife. These discoveries proved that Sumerian civilization had achieved a level of artistic sophistication and international trade networks that wouldn't be matched for centuries. The precious materials in these tombs, gold for Anatolia, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, silver from the Taurus Mountains, shells from the Arabian Peninsula, demonstrated trade routes spanning thousands of kilometers. Lagash and Umma fought the world's first recorded territorial war over fertile farmland in the regions called Goedan. This century-long conflict, documented on monuments like the famous Stele of the Vultures, shows organized armies with advanced weapons and military tactics. King Inatum of Lagash expanded his territory through successful military campaigns against Elam, conquering cities and plundering wealth. His victories were recorded in detailed inscriptions that provide our first glimpse into ancient diplomatic and military practices. During this period, Sumerian kings began commissioning royal inscriptions and portraits, establishing traditions of royal propaganda that would influence rulers for millennia. They also created the first world law codes, with reforms addressing everything from property rights to criminal justice. The Akkadian conquest and Sargon's empire. But the golden age of independent Sumerian city-states was about to end with the rise of history's first true emperor, a man who would change the ancient world forever. Around 2334 BC, a revolutionary figure emerged in northern Mesopotamia. Sargon of Akkad, whose birth name is unknown, rose from humble beginnings to create the world's first multi-ethnic empire. His origin story reads like legend, supposedly born to a priestess and set adrift in a reed basket in the Euphrates River, rescued and raised by a gardener. The Akkadians were a Semitic-speaking people who had lived alongside the Sumerians for centuries, gradually adopting Sumerian culture while maintaining their own distinct identity. Unlike the Sumerians, who had never unified under a single ruler, Sargon envisioned something unprecedented, bringing all of Mesopotamia under centralized control. Sargon's military campaigns were swift and brutal. He conquered the Sumerian city-states one by one, dismantling their walls to prevent future rebellions. This policy of enforced defenselessness was a radical departure from previous warfare practices and demonstrated the severity of Akkadian rule. But Sargon didn't stop with Sumer. His empire expanded to include Syria, where he destroyed the powerful kingdom of Ebla, and Elam, where he captured the capital city of Susa. His domain stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea and from the Zagros Mountains of Anatolia, the first known attempt to create a centralized, multi-ethnic state. To control this vast territory, Sargon established the world's first imperial administration. He appointed family members and loyal Akkadians to high positions, replacing Sumerian governors and priests. Military garrisons were stationed in key locations, and a sophisticated tax system funneled wealth to his new capital city of Agade. The linguistic impact was profound. Akkadian replaced Sumerian as the official administrative language throughout the empire, while Sumerian continued to be used for religious and literary purposes. Akkadian became the lingua franca of international diplomacy and trade for the next 2,000 years. Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin, took imperial power even further. He crushed rebellions throughout the empire and adopted the revolutionary title King of the Four Corners of the World. Most shocking of all, he declared himself a living god, the first Mesopotamian ruler to claim divine status while still alive. The collapse and the Gushan invasion. But even the mighty Akkadian Empire couldn't survive the combination of internal weakness and external invasion that would reshape Mesopotamia forever. By 2200 BC, the Akkadian Empire was facing severe challenges. A prolonged period of drought and climate change devastated agriculture production, weakening the state's economic foundation. Internal rebellions erupted throughout the empire as local populations sought to overthrow Akkadian rule. The final blow came from an unexpected direction. The Zagros Mountains to the east, the Gushans, a tribal people considered barbarians by the sophisticated Mesopotamians, launched a devastating invasion. Around 2200 BC, their leader Erdupazer defeated the Akkadian army and captured the sacred city of Nippur. The Gushan conquest marked the beginnings of what historians call Mesopotamia's first dark age. As mountain dwellers, the Gushans had little experience with the complex irrigation systems essential for Mesopotamian agriculture. Canals broke down, agricultural production collapsed, and many cities were abandoned. Unlike the well-organized Akkadian administration, Gushan rule was primarily military in nature. They established garrisons throughout their territory but lacked the bureaucratic expertise to manage complex urban societies. Trade networks collapsed, and much of the accumulated wealth of centuries was lost. However, this period wasn't uniformly dark. In some regions, particularly in the south, traditional Sumerian life continued relatively undisturbed. The city-state of Lagash experienced remarkable prosperity under King Gudea, who undertook massive temple construction projects using materials imported from distant lands. Gudea's reign represents a fascinating Sumerian cultural revival. He presented himself not as a conqueror, but as a humble servant of the gods, particularly Lagash's patron deity Ningirsu. His numerous statues, carved from expensive diorite stones imported from Megan, show him in traditional Sumerian pose with hands clasped in prayer. The Gushan period lasted nearly a century, but their control gradually weakened as they faced growing resistance from Akkadians, Elamites, and Sumerians alike. The final blow came from the Utuhangal, the ruler of Uruk, who around 2120 BC defeated the Gushans and drove them out of Mesopotamia, ending over a century of foreign rule. The Third Dynasty of Ur, Sumerian Renaissance. What happened next was one of history's most remarkable cultural revivals, the Sumerians' final golden age that would see them reach new heights of power and influence. After Utuhangal's death, leadership passed to his son-in-law Ur-Nammu, who founded the Third Dynasty of Ur in 2112 BC. This marked the beginning of the Neo-Sumerian period. the last great flowering of Sumerian civilization. Ur-Nammu succeeded in reunifying Sumer and Akkad under centralized rule and launched an ambitious campaign to rebuild the region. His greatest achievement was the construction of the Great Ziggurat of Ur, a massive step temple dedicated to the moon god Nana, standing 46 meters wide and 30 meters high. Its ruins still dominate the southern Iraqi plains today. But Ur-Nammu's most lasting contribution was legal reform. He created the Code of Ur-Nammu, believed to be the oldest surviving law code in history. These laws covered everything from murder and property crimes to marriage and inheritance, establishing principles of justice that would influence legal systems for millennia. The real architect of Neo-Sumerian power was Ur-Nammu's son, Shulgi, who reigned for an impressive 48 years. Under his rule, the empire's territory tripled in size through successful military campaigns that extended Sumerian control from the Zagros Mountains to central Iran. Shulgi established the world's first organized conscripted army and created a sophisticated imperial administration. He introduced the Bala system, a rotating tax mechanism where each of the temple's 20 provinces contributed goods to the central treasury for 1 month per year. This innovation made resource management more efficient and reduced the tax burden on individual regions. Around the 20th year of his reign, Shulgi made a radical decision. He declared himself a living god, following the precedent set by Naram Sin centuries earlier. Temples honoring the divine king were erected throughout the empire, complete with priests, administrators, and daily rituals. The Neo-Sumerian Empire became a highly centralized bureaucratic state supported by thousands of trained scribes. We have approximately 100,000 cuneiform tablets from this period, more administrative documents than from any other era in ancient Near Eastern history. These records provide unprecedented insight into how the world's first bureaucratic state actually functioned. The final collapse and the end of an era. But this Sumerian Renaissance contained the seeds of its own destruction, internal weaknesses and external pressures that would bring down the last Sumerian empire forever. The problem began during the reign of Shulgi's successors. The highly centralized bureaucracy that had functioned efficiently under strong leadership became bloated and corrupt under weaker rulers. Economic challenges were compounded by environmental disasters. Over-irrigation had caused salinization of the soil, reducing crop yields and leading to food shortages. The gravest threat came from population movements that the Sumerians couldn't control. From the west, the Amorites, nomadic Semitic tribes from Syria and the Levant, began migrating into Mesopotamia in increasing numbers. The Sumerians, who considered themselves the pinnacle of civilization, viewed these nomads with contempt, describing them as people who know no grain, who know no house, no town. King Shusin tried to stop the Amorite infiltration by building a massive wall, but it proved ineffective. The Amorites continued to enter the region, some settling peacefully while others formed raiding bands that disrupted trade and agriculture. The final crisis came during the reign of Ibisin, the last king of Ur's third dynasty. He faced simultaneous threats from multiple directions: Amorite tribes penetrating deeper into Mesopotamia, Elamite armies invading from the east, and rebellions breaking out throughout his empire. In a desperate attempt to maintain control, Ibisin appointed Ishbi-Era, a local governor from the city of Isin, to secure grain supplies for famine-stricken Ur. But Ishbi-Era harbored royal ambitions of his own. In 2017 BC, he openly betrayed Ibisin, declaring himself king of Isin and seizing control of the holy city of Nippur. This betrayal triggered a cascade of rebellions as other governors declared independence and formed their own states. Ibisin's empire fragmented into competing kingdoms while external enemies passed their advantage. The end came in 2004 BC when the Elamites, allied with Gushan forces, delivered the final blow. After years of siege, they breached Ur's wall and thoroughly sacked the city. Ibisin was captured and taken to Anshan as a prisoner, marking the end of the third dynasty of Ur and the collapse of the Neo-Sumerian Empire. The fall of Ur was seen as a cosmic catastrophe. The famous lamentation over the destruction of Ur describes the gods abandoning the city and dooming it to destruction. The poem tells of brutal invaders, looted temples, and desperate mothers fleeing with their children. The legacy that shaped civilization. Although the Sumerians vanished as a distinct people over 4,000 years ago, their influence on human civilization is so profound that we encounter it every single day without realizing it. The most obvious legacy is writing itself. The cuneiform system developed by the Sumerians became the foundation for literacy throughout the ancient world. Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, Elamite, Hittite, and Persian empires all use variations of Sumerian cuneiform. The concept of preserving information in permanent written form, from laws and contracts to literature and historical records, originated in Sumerian temples and spread throughout human civilization. Their mathematical innovation remain embedded in our modern world. The 60-minute hour, the 360-degree circle, the 24-hour day, and the 7-day week all trace back to Sumerian mathematics and astronomy. Every time someone checks their watch or uses a GPS device, they're using time and spatial measurements invented 6,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia. Sumerian legal principles establish precedents that continue to influence modern jurisprudence. The concept of written law codes, proportional punishment, property rights, and contractual obligations all originated in Sumerian city-states. The Code of Ur-Nammu and other Sumerian legal texts provided models that later influenced the famous Code of Hammurabi and, through it, legal systems throughout the Mediterranean world. Their urban planning innovations created the template for city organizations that persist today. The concept of centralized administration, specialized districts, public spaces, defensive walls, and monumental architecture all began in Sumerian cities like Uruk and Ur. Religious influence is equally profound. Sumerian mythology provided source material for many stories that became central to later religions. The flood narrative featuring Ziusudra influenced the Akkadian epic of Gilgamesh and the biblical story of Noah. Creation myths, divine kingship, temple architecture, and ritual practices developed by the Sumerians were adopted and adapted by Babylonians, Assyrians, and other ancient peoples. Even their gods lived on under new names. Inanna became Ishtar, Enki became E, Utu became Shamash, and Nana became Sin. These deities remained central to Mesopotamian religion for thousands of years, and their attributes influenced gods throughout the ancient Mediterranean world. The Sumerian concept of civilization itself, the idea that humans could transform their environment through technology, organization, and cooperation, became the foundation for all subsequent urban societies. They proved that people could create complex institutions, monumental architecture, and sophisticated culture even in challenging environments. Their influence reached far beyond Mesopotamia. Greek philosophers studied Babylonian mathematics and astronomy, which preserved Sumerian knowledge. Roman law incorporates principles that trace back to Sumerian legal codes. Early Christian monasteries preserved classical texts that contain Sumerian wisdom passed down through centuries. Modern archaeology owes its existence partly to the Sumerians. They were the first civilization to leave extensive written records that allow us to understand ancient life in remarkable detail. The hundreds of thousands of cuneiform tablets they created provide an unparalleled window into humanity's earliest urban experiments. Their cities returned to dust, their language fell silent, but their innovations continue to shape every aspect of human life. In our writing systems, our mathematics, our laws, our cities, and our understanding of what civilization can achieve, the Sumerians live on, the forgotten architects of the modern world.